Hello and welcome to the BigFix Briefing Room. My name is Michelle McGough and I'm here with Mr. Joe Saylor. It's a new year, January 2025, and we're here to tell you what's new. As always, we're going to kick off with the Microsoft Patch Tuesday overview. There are a lot of 0 days this month, so a lot to pay attention to. We'll talk about some CVEs and the dark side of AI. Clickjacking has returned. I'll give you a little preview. It's called double clickjacking, I believe. And we have a new thing that we want to talk about, not specific to releases, but about how to invoke a new product release by submitting your ideas to the BigFix Ideas portal. So Joe, you want to kick us off with Microsoft?
Yeah, of course. So it turns
Thanks.
out that we had such a light month last month because everybody was just on vacation, and we're catching up now. So we got 159 total vulnerabilities this month. Our average number over the course of a year is usually like 80 to 90 per month. So we are really playing catch up right now. We have 8 0 days, which is also a very high number. 3 of them are being actively exploited, although they're kind of more all of the same vulnerability, so it's not as bad as it sounds. And then we have just a really epic critical in the Outlook preview pane to talk about as well.
Okay, well, let's break these down. So this first one is, looks like a low severity in Hyper-V.
Yeah, so this is a set of 3 vulnerabilities in Hyper-V. They all appear to be very similar. One of the things that's a little obnoxious about how these are presented is that Microsoft didn't give us any details. So in their published CVE page for all of these, there's practically nothing, just that it is an elevation of privilege vulnerability. It was reported anonymously, and that's pretty much all the detail we have. In these cases, this is where, being a little more active about checking out the CVSS scoring information for these really comes to the rescue. These ones in particular, the 2 relevant bits of data here are that the attack vector is local, meaning that a attacker has to already be on these systems. So with that, we can infer that there's no no sideways movement. So we can't just contact the hypervisor and then hit a guest. So this is all local to the guest. We also see that the privileges required are low. There's a level below that, which is none. So low means that we have to have some sort of authentication inside these boxes as well. So, it's bad that they're actively exploited. There's code out there that can hit these things, but it's not, red alarm fire where an attacker can just get to these boxes if they're just on the network anywhere, right? You have to already be compromised.
Okay, thanks for breaking that down. I think sometimes when there isn't enough detail, it can be a little kind of nerve-wracking trying to figure it out. So by being able to look at it being a local attack vector, but low privilege is required, it gives you a way to balance that out. Thank you. What's next? AI detected 0 days. And this is an access with some remote code execution.
Yeah, so I really wanted to call these out. It's another block of 3 0 days that are all very similar. This is all stuff where a user has to be tricked into opening a file. Any sort of access file can be maliciously crafted so that an attacker can run whatever the heck they want. Pretty standard for Windows. To me, this isn't particularly threatening. We have 70 other CVEs that look a lot like this. The thing that's super interesting about these is that they were detected and reported by an AI tool. It's kind of the first one of these that I've seen reported as a 0 day. And to me, that really, I think this is a sea change where we're seeing AI tools that just, front to back, find vulnerabilities and report them. I would have loved to see this in a little more of a white hat fashion. Reporting this as a 0 day through this tool is, kind of sketchy behavior. I don't like that it was reported before we had a fix, but we're going to see just a real acceleration in detection, and this is the start of it.
Counterpoint, though, often researchers will find vulnerabilities and they'll approach the vendor to coordinate them creating a fix before the CVE is disclosed. So those exploits have been there, or the exploit opportunity through the vulnerability is there, but it's often not reported until the vendor has resolved it. So I think I understand what you're saying is that you would have liked to see it not be reported and disclosed for it to be hijacked effectively before there was a fix.
Yeah,
Am I getting
not
that right?
publicly disclosed. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. The public
yeah,
disclosure
okay,
before a fix is available that makes this a scary precedent to set.
okay, thank you. Yeah, that is big news and it does reflect a change. So here we've got another 0-day. Now this is the window app package installer. Now that is something that's kind of near and dear to our hearts, going back to how we were first working with BigFix. So what's happening here?
Yeah, so this is it's a 0 day, so it bears talking about. But again, it requires a file to be loaded onto an endpoint and a user to be tricked into clicking on it. So this is
Okay.
pretty standard stuff for Windows. I hate to poo-poo it too much. It's bad that it was disclosed before a fix was available, but again, not particularly scary. So even though we have a ton of 0 days, they aren't quite as malicious as you might expect from a 0 day situation.
Do you feel like a 6.8 is an accurate score given what has been disclosed?
Yeah, for sure. In the Windows space, 6.8 doesn't really indicate that it's anything particularly terrifying. There are exceptions, of course, depending on your details and the exact context of it. But in this case, the 6.8 makes sense just because it requires some sort of authentication to happen, requires an
Okay.
attacker to be local already. So it shouldn't be too high, but it does allow that attacker to get up to system privileges, which is, that's where the confidentiality of it comes in, and that's why it makes it above 6.
Okay, thanks, Joe. What's next? Yeah, more. It does seem like a lot. So there were 8 total, and we're covering
Oh,
7 today, I think.
it's all of them. This is all 8.
All of them. Okay. All right. Thanks. So here's another attack vector interacting with a malicious file. And I see
Yeah.
something here about themes.
Yeah, so this is a vulnerability in themes in Windows. We have seen several a lot like this recently. There was one maybe 2 months ago where basically the same thing would happen. There could be a shortcut file and you don't have to open it. You just have to click on it, like left click or right click, like a single one
Oh, okay.
ends up sending your NTLM hash out to an attacker. Since we're going to see more of
Wow.
these, we should talk about why. Like, why is that even possible? It doesn't make sense to me that, just selecting a file could send your credentials anywhere. That's crazy, right? Um, so how it works is inside these files, for themes specifically this time, you can specify a network path for the theme, like for elements within the theme. So a URL or a UNC path, just something, a path that's not local. And Windows, in an attempt to be very helpful, as it always is, pre-validates your session against that network path. So it sends out your current credentials. It's hashed, of course, it's not like plain text,
Okay.
but it sends your NTLM credentials in hash form just out to any arbitrary network path when you click the file, when you interact with it in any way.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. I mean, I don't really know how you restrict that other than with the policy, which is what you're advising here is to put in a restriction policy.
Yeah, so in this case, the group policy, you can, configure this in Active Directory, restricting NTLM and restrict the outgoing NTLM traffic. That kind of disables this and protects you from this kind of NTLM theft. I assume it will work on future versions of this kind of vulnerability. And so that's probably something that, we should all really be looking at is implementing this.
Okay, so that's a take home for you. An action item would be to take a look at that use policy to restrict NTLM when it's going outbound. Do you believe that a 5.7 is accurate given the fact that the credentials are hashed and that it can be limited pretty easily with a policy?
So I think in terms of prioritization, 5.7 is way low for this. That is just, it does not match with the level of threat.
Okay,
once a threat actor has NTLM hash passwords, they have it locally, so there's no like limit on the number of tries they can have to break the hash, right? So they just have to break it through brute force, which is
Yeah.
completely possible, right? Or they can pass it off as the hashed password in an NTLM attack, like they get the password hashed, right? And so therefore the hashed password is still usable, right? It's still useful for them because they can just pass it along in the same way that Windows already passed it along.
Yep.
So yeah,
Okay.
for
Thanks.
5.7, it's way worse than that, right? This one in specific, just because it circumvents, my internal defenses, probably your internal defenses too, where, I just do not think that left clicking a file is a dangerous behavior. So, it's
Agree. Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's just
Okay.
that's not something that I defend against myself. So, I imagine many people would get caught by this as well.
All right. Okay. What are you going to hit us with next? A 9.8. So we opened with the 6.8s, but we
Yeah.
are getting to the higher scores here. This is the preview pane.
Yeah, so these have come out every now and then. Feels like we get like one or two a year. So this is a vulnerability where in the OLE um, the OLE remote code execution vulnerability here allows an attacker to send a specially crafted email that will do whatever they want. It's any sort of code execution that will activate in the preview pane. So meaning if it's on top of your email and you open up Outlook, it'll just automatically preview and execute whatever the heck is inside of it.
I think we have seen some of these before, and yeah, object link embedding allows us to do some really cool things. But so there's not a solution for this at this point.
Yeah, I mean the solution is the patch. Like that's it.
Oh, there is a
Fortunately,
patch. Okay, so we do have a patch.
yeah, I mean, fortunately, it wasn't disclosed before the patch was available, so we haven't had attackers working on how to exploit this and crafting emails already. But this does trigger a pretty standard vulnerability arms race. This has huge implications for anybody trying to defend against an attack right now, and the attack surface is really wide. Of course, incoming email is a massive amount of traffic, and this kind of like zero-click vulnerability inside of email, you can guarantee that there are threat groups out there trying to exploit it right now. So the faster you get this patched, uh, the less likely you are to get run over by them.
Okay, and allow me to ask a question that might, for some people, might be a stupid question, but it's a sincere question that I have. I understand that if Outlook is installed locally, that this would definitely be a threat. What if someone is using the web version of Outlook?
Yeah, so the web version of Outlook hosted by Microsoft is certainly already patched.
Okay. Yep.
Maybe certainly is the wrong word. I am fairly certain it's
I
already patched.
suspect.
I
Yeah.
suspect it seems very unlikely that they would publish this and not have already patched their own internal systems. Can't be sure, don't have visibility on it, but generally that's how it works here.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. What do we have here? Unauthenticated multicast remote code execution. I'm not familiar with a PGM server. Can you just briefly describe what that is?
Yeah, so this is just the built-in multicast in the Windows OS.
Okay.
So, there isn't a like specific thing that you need to be worried about running here. It's not enabled by default. It's not listening by default in any version of the OS. So this is all just like if you have multicast anywhere in your environment that you're aware of, you should, stop everything and patch it right now. It's not super likely that you have a really big attack surface. Multicast is not typically exposed to the internet. It's typically kind of an intranet type thing, like maybe for imaging systems, we'll typically use multicast because you might have like a build room where, you got to plug in 40 desktops at a time and get them all imaged, right? And we use multicast for that typically. So severity-wise, this one's really, really bad on those individual boxes because it's not difficult to exploit. It's remote code execution, meaning you can run whatever you want once you've exploited this, and it doesn't require any user interaction. So
It
any
just
of
needs
these
to be
boxes,
enabled and listening. Like,
yeah,
that's it. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
that's it. And if an attacker has network line of sight on it, they can just take it over. So the vulnerability is huge, but context-wise, these are not common systems, right? You don't have a ton of these just like listening everywhere. So if the word multicast hits your brain a little bit about your environment, like go hunting for it right now. Make sure you get those boxes patched. Those are, to my view, critical to get done like immediately.
Thank you, Joe. And here we got another remote code execution. This one execution. This one against remote desktop. We have seen some of these in the past year. So this looks like a repeat.
It is almost verbatim a repeat of a thing we talked about last month. So this is unauthenticated, we don't need any sort of like pre-compromised
Oh.
account. It runs against gateways, runs against the remote desktop gateway server. So again, you're not going to have many of these boxes out there, so the attack surface isn't super wide. We talked about this last month, exactly how it works. It's a use after free type vulnerability.
Right.
Yeah, so, and just to go over it again, and sorry to anyone who actually watched this last month, but here we go. So certain programming languages require the programmer to manage memory, meaning that they have to, like load whatever code they're going to run into a memory space and then tell the program to run that memory space. And then they have to delete what they threw in there and delete the pointer and manage all of that like very explicitly. In this case, we have a pointer that says, hey, run this legitimate remote desktop code. And then the programmer has decided to delete whatever we were running, the legitimate code, but they didn't clean up the pointer. So, we're still trying to run memory address 1, right? Even though there's nothing there. And that's fine. It's not like harmful while it's running nothing. But that leaves room for an attacker who has access to the box or not access to the box, but access to this memory space to slip in whatever the heck they want to run, and that pointer will run it. In this case, there is a network port that the remote desktop gateway is listening to that the attacker can use to slip in instructions inside like a TCP frame.
Okay. Yep, I do remember this from last month. And what was interesting about this last month was we weren't really seeing at the time use after free exploits in Windows. We were seeing them in Linux, in the Linux kernel. And so at least anything that was high enough to sort of reach our filter. So I hope we're not going to see a lot more of these moving forward. It's a fairly high severity. And it's very frustrating to see this now in Windows.
Yeah, use after free is a super common term to hear in the Linux space, mostly because like all of the Linux vulnerabilities are local, and typically in order to slip something into memory, you really need to be local. We don't see it so much in Microsoft because like most times there's no network interface that allows an attacker to slip things into memory, but there just happens to be one in the remote desktop gateway.
Okay. Okay. All right. Stories of the month. I'm curious what you have chosen for us. Oh yeah, the click check.
We just got
Yeah.
the one story for you this month.
Okay.
I thought this one was really interesting. You've probably all heard of clickjacking. Just quick overview. Basically, a malicious page can have like an invisible frame over it that will like essentially redirect your click to a different site that does does legitimate things, right? Like it might have an invisible frame that contains your banking information, that it is kind of pre-populated because it knows where like you have cookies, right? Those are all loaded up, and it needs you to click on OK to like transfer money or whatever. But it's invisible, you can't see it, and boom, you've just lost stuff. We have ways to defend against that. There are like websites can prevent themselves from being loaded elsewhere, and pretty much globally all that stuff is implemented, right? So you don't really need to worry about clickjacking so much. What some jerk has come up with is a way to bypass the invisible frame altogether by using a double click. They manipulate, just the human's propensity for double clicking when asked
Oh,
to slip
right,
in.
right. Because in the browser, you normally are single clicking, in a lot of apps, even on the mobile apps, you're tapping once. You're not double clicking like you would for something local. And they're just tricking you into doing that,
Yeah, so the idea is we have,
basically.
yeah, so like, pretend we have like a fake CAPTCHA image, right? You got to double
Hmm.
click on the image of a bus. Personally, I would be a little weirded out by needing to double click on a web page because as you've mentioned, we don't really do that frequently. It's not a UI pattern. But if you were asked, like if CAPTCHA asked me to double click, I'll double click. I'm a human. Like I can follow
Oh,
instructions
right. Yeah.
because of
Okay.
course. So the way it's exploited is on click, on the click down, the malicious page will swap it to something else. So we have a single click on our bus, and then suddenly we're clicking on something else. So there's no iframe, there's no layered frames. It's just slipped in something else that we click on that is obviously going to be malicious and do whatever the heck they want.
And thanks for making me laugh at the all your base reference, because now everybody knows how old I am. That was very kind of you. But that is really, if I hadn't read about this today, I could fall for it.
Yeah,
I understand what you mean, that it's just double clicking is such an inherent um, interface muscle memory, that I could see yeah, being hijacked by that. So where are we seeing this? Do we know any more about where this is happening?
well, so this was, I think the article on this came out maybe a week or so ago, and it was
Okay,
just a security researcher at the time. He had, presented all sorts of proof of concepts that seemed to work. Obviously, the security researcher, didn't actually post things out on the internet that are
of
actually
course.
malicious. But as a
Right.
strategy, I could see this catching on, you know. Um,
Shoot.
it's just an idea, really. Like it's not necessarily code that you have to like use and implement, It's just the idea of asking the user to double click something that looks legitimate and then, slipping something in underneath it. Just because nobody, when I start to double click, I don't quit. I don't single click and then wait and double click, right?
Sure.
So yeah, as an idea, I kind of expected to catch on. Like we're gonna see this, so be wary of double clicks.
Seasons everywhere. I am so sorry to have to tell you about this. How are you going to train people for
Yeah,
this one? I don't mean to laugh. If I didn't laugh, that energy would give me an ulcer. So, well, thanks for telling us about it. I think this is definitely a good public service announcement. All right. Um, okay. Oh, BigFix ideas. Can I introduce this one too?
all
Because
all
this
yours.
is close to me. It's all mine. So for BigFix customers, when you see us, typically talking about new releases, and we do have some stuff we could talk about this month, but what we really wanted to do is to bring awareness to the BigFix Ideas portal. It is an extremely low friction, easy way to request product enhancements, and we're a pretty high touch, company. We definitely engage with our customers, and in the past, we had habits of, oh, if you haven't submitted that idea to our ideas portal, we'll just submit it on submit it for you. The thing is, when we submit as employees, when we submit ideas on your behalf, they show up as if it was, my idea or Joe's idea or your, tech advisor's idea. And it doesn't log back to the organization that is, the paying customer. And in product, they are definitely going to give more consideration to ideas that are submitted actually by the customer. We really want to encourage you to do that because we actually look at these. We do. And it's how we inform our product strategy as we go, through the year and into the next set of development cycles. And what Joe has curated here is a set of, just some recent ideas just from BigFix inventory that have been implemented. And it just goes to show that, we really do listen to your feedback. And so the takeaway here is not just that we actually do listen to your feedback, but that we really encourage you to submit those ideas yourselves because they do get more consideration than if an employee submits that enhancement request. And the way that you do that is you go to bigfix-ideas at hcltechsoftware.com. You don't even really have to know that address. If you just do an internet search for BigFix Ideas, it's going to be the first result. So go ahead and go in there. It's very easy to log in. It's not hard to authenticate. And then once you're in there, you can browse existing ideas and plus one. And then you can also submit your own. And if you do happen to submit a duplicate, we can merge them so that it, ultimately does result in a plus one. So it's really easy. It really works. And we definitely encourage you to do that. Now, Joe, you represent some very high touch customers with your role in AVP. And I think you've also seen just from your own customer portfolio that those ideas do get implemented. Do you have anything you'd want to add or advise people who are watching about the ideas portal?
Yeah, vote, vote, vote. Get your I
Yes.
voted sticker. Go vote on
Yeah.
stuff. The general number of votes that we see on these ideas is not super, super high. And so every one counts. Anytime we even get
Yes.
like 10 votes on an idea, like that just goes straight to the top. That has just a huge amount of momentum
Yes.
behind it. So yeah, find the things you like, throw votes on them, and we listen. We get this stuff implemented.
You can't vote multiple times though. So if you think Joe's encouraging you to game the system, it doesn't exactly work that way. But what I have seen is at our user groups, people will sometimes talk about ideas that they've submitted, and they'll encourage other customers to vote on them. You can also do that in the BigFix Slack and in the BigFix forum as well. Like, hey, I just submitted this idea. Is anybody else into it? You can go ahead and campaign for votes if you want to. They're all legitimate. So go forth, submit your ideas, and vote. So we're really glad to have you do that. I think that's it for this month. Is that right, Joe?
That's everything.
All right. Well, thanks. If you stay with us this long, we really appreciate you. And we'll see you again next month.